Let these ICE agents do their job. What's going on?
There's going to be a group of people that are going to veer off what I saw. I saw something completely different. That's unfortunate, but at the same time,
Okay, Speed. If you need Speed, do what you had to do. Right? Thanks for joining in.
Good morning and welcome to the KTLA 540 News at 11 a.m. I'm Glenn Walker.
And I'm Lou Parker. Thanks for joining us. We begin with breaking news from Willowbrook, where...
Hold on. I hit something. What is that? Oh, it's from Fox. Son of a bee. All right, let's try that again. I was about to start breaking down.
Thanks, Bruce. How you been, man? How you been?
All right, let's go.
Shooting has occurred during a federal immigration enforcement operation.
Officials say agents were trying to take a violent criminal into custody when shots were fired. KTLA 5's Chip Yost live at the scene with the latest information. Chip?
Just sharing what's going on. Latest news. That's all I'm doing. Like and subscribe.
Here we are on 126th Street. This is between Willowbrook and Mona. Around 7 this morning, there was an operation taking place here that resulted in a federal agent opening fire. You can see they have a large number of agents still on scene here, along with some investigators. We're going to read a statement here in a moment from the Department of Homeland Security describing what happened. After that, we'll show you some more video from Sky 5 HD, but let's start with that statement if we could. We'll put it up on the screen for you. It says, at 7:05 a.m., Department of Homeland Security law enforcement officers were conducting a targeted operation in Compton, California. We're in Willowbrook. This is right next to Compton.
As long as you're healing, man. You're at home healing, man. Blessings, man. Speedy recovery in Jesus' name.
Eduardo Moran Carabello, who is involved in a human smuggling operation and has 2 prior arrests for inflicting corporal injury on a spouse or cohabitant. An immigration judge issued him a final order of removal in 2019. In a dangerous attempt to evade arrest, this criminal illegal alien weaponized his vehicle and rammed law enforcement. Fearing for his life and safety, an agent fired defensive shots. The criminal illegal alien was not attempted to flee on foot. He was successfully apprehended by law enforcement. The illegal alien was not injured, but a CBP officer was injured. Now let's go to some more video from Sky 5 HD. After this incident happened, a large number of folks
Thank you.
from around
Thank you for subscribing. Thank you so much.
The area who had heard about it, many of them protesting the presence of federal agents in this neighborhood. We also spoke to a young woman who lives in this neighborhood down the street from where this happened. We talked to her about this, and she said that information that we just read you from the Department of Homeland Security did not change her opinion about how she feels about federal agents being in her neighborhood.
It's been a minute.
Well, it's scary because, you're not safe in your own home. You're at your home and you don't know if you could go out and anything is going to happen to you.
The Department of Homeland Security put out a statement saying this was a targeted action against a person who's in the country illegally that has a criminal record. Does that change anything as far as you're concerned?
No, because regardless, so far I haven't seen them only going for criminals. They've been going for innocent people, separating families.
And here's another live look of what's taking place now. Looks like an investigation underway.
And it looks like there's going to be a press conference here in just a little bit about this as well. So that's coming up here shortly.
To that shooting, they've got the whole street blocked off here at 126th. Again, this is between Mona and Willowbrook. In Willowbrook, right next to the city of Compton. For now,
yeah, looks like there's going to be a press conference here in just a few seconds, a few minutes. Let me pull that up for you guys too.
Now from Fox. So we did want to share that with you. We're also monitoring a number of other live events here on Live Now from Fox, and we do see this live of investigations. This just popped up on our screen, and it's a little unclear as to exactly, where this might be from. But as soon as we get more information, we will bring that to you. In the meantime, though, we have a lot of other live events that we do want to get to. And in the meantime, Greenland live look, we did see a lot of people walking down the staircase. No sight of President Trump, but of course, for this, and you always have to wonder whether he might be speaking about the latest developments on Greenland, as he has been throughout the many meetings that we have been airing right here on Live Now from Fox. So we did want to share that with you. We're also monitoring a number of other live events here on Live Now from Fox, and we do see this live look right here. This is with the Bureau of Investigations. This just popped up on our screen, and it's a little unclear as to exactly, where this might be from. But as soon as we get more information, we will bring that to you. In the meantime, though, we have
cells can reorganize themselves in some really amazing ways, especially with stem cells. They can be anything.
All right, that's something completely different. Hold up, guys. They're talking about some other stuff. That's not what we're here for. We're here for information. Yeah, hold on. Un momento, por favor.
CBS LA Mornings
All
starts
right, here we
breaking
go.
news.
Breaking
Breaking at
news.
11, Border Patrol agents opened fire during an operation in Willowbrook. Nobody was hit by gunfire, but right now a tense standoff between neighbors and federal agents. We're going to get right to CBS LA's Rick Montanez, who's live at the scene, has been all morning.
Well, Jamie, things got a little bit more tense within the last few minutes because the LASD, which is out here assisting in terms of the crime scene and the perimeter here, they started pushing everybody further back at the request of federal agents, which angered a lot of people here in the crowd who are already so frustrated, so angry, and they have been shouting at the agents, at even LASD as they are out here. We can also tell you that we've seen a lot more agents arrive. Let's show you a video from just a short time ago where we saw at least one van in this video you'll see here show up with a lot of agents getting out there in tactical gear with weapons out and drawn. And then we've also seen people from the FBI, from Homeland Security Investigations, the ATF, as well as the U.S. Marshals, Border Patrol, CHP, and the Sheriff's Department are all out here. We want to read a statement to you from DHS, which side of things, what happened here. So here we go. It says at 7:05 a.m., DHS law enforcement officers were conducting a targeted operation in Compton, California to arrest a violent criminal illegal alien from El Salvador, William Eduardo Moran Carballo, who is involved in a human smuggling operation and has 2 prior arrests for inflicting corporal injury on a spouse or cohabitant. An immigration judge issued his final order of removal in 2019. DHS goes on to say, in a dangerous attempt to evade arrest, the criminal illegal alien weaponized his vehicle and law enforcement, fearing for his life and safety. An agent fired defensive shots. The criminal illegal alien, the statement says, was not hit and attempted to flee on foot. He was successfully apprehended by law enforcement. The illegal alien, the statement says, was not injured, but a CBP officer was injured. We also, though, talked with a woman who says she witnessed what happened, that she saw agents out here yesterday, and she saw the confrontation, which we have not seen video of yet, but here's how she describes it.
What happened was that I have a neighbor, right? So he was heading out to his car, and then they were already parked inside, though. Like, there was like a white van and like a gray car that was already parked inside, and a couple of the cars, but I couldn't catch them. And he was walking out, and then as soon as he went inside his car, that's when, like, I guess they tried getting him out the car, and he tried running to his car. But then that's when they shot him, like, they shot, like, twice.
You heard that, right? Uh-oh. Isn't that crazy? Eyewitness says, of course, eyewitness, you never know, everyone sees things different, right? But she's saying, I'm going to play that again so we could see that. Hear what
subscribe, hit that like button. Thank you guys for joining in. Appreciate it.
Very important to hear what
latest news.
Said. But apparently he went into his car. They ran up to try to get him. He freaked out and drove. Now, was there somebody in front, boxing him in by standing in front of the car? That could be it too, but let's
his car, and then they were.
Let me do that and roll back a little bit more.
Video of yet, but here's how she describes it.
What happened was that I have a neighbor, right? So he was heading out to his car, and then they were already parked inside, though. Like, there was like a white van and like a gray car that was already parked inside, and a couple of the cars, but I couldn't catch them. and he was walking out, and then as soon as he went inside his car, that's when, like, I guess they tried getting him out the car, and he tried running away his car. But then that's when they shot him, like, they shot, like, twice.
You heard that, right? So again, he
Hello,
walked out
hello.
to his car. He got into trying to get him out of the car. I guess the guy freaked out and drove off. Now, did he use his car as a weapon? Is that true? Or is that just a fugazi? And they just shot at him anyway because he was driving away. Was he being shot at for just driving away? That's a question. Because they said, just so you know, they did not say that he was exchanging gunfire. They didn't say that he had a weapon on him. That's absolutely very important information. But let's continue.
And so between neighbors, community activists who are angry, who are shouting for ICE agents, federal agents.
Like and subscribe, everybody. Thanks for joining in. It's the LA shooting just happened in LA with ICE.
And then so things have gotten really tense out here. And as we come back live again, we can see that it is still very tense situation here. And so they're trying to sort through a lot of this. Neighbors are very angry. Even sheriff's deputy here talking about the perimeter changes and things going on here. And so we're going to toss back to Mark Liu at the assignment desk because, Mark, you have information on really just kind of the scope of how big this scene is out here.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Rick. And it has been growing. We've seen this with Sky Cow here at the desk all morning. Let's go to those live pictures right now, and you're going to see essentially what Rick was in the middle of down there. This is 126th Street and Mona. This is on the western end of this very large scene that has now encompassed almost all of 126th Street all the way to Alameda. You can see there's a lot of media down there. And then there's also a lot of people from the area with their cell phones. Now, that is the car in question that Customs and Border Patrol say had that dangerous undocumented worker that they were trying to take into custody. That person they named as William Eduardo Moran Carballo, they say that he is now in custody. They did open fire at one point, but he was not struck. They say a Customs and Border Patrol officer was injured. You can see, though, this part of 126th Street is getting really crowded with cars. There's the far end of that crime scene line where there are also media and other people from the neighborhood down there with their cell phones. Now, this caravan, you see right in the middle, all of those SUVs, just a few minutes ago, they arrived. Sky Cow caught video of that. We didn't know exactly who was in that caravan. Let me show you that video now of those, of that caravan arriving. You can see this.
What just happened?
What just happened? That is insane. They just took this down. Why did they take this down? Wow, look at that. Wow, they just took that down. Why did they take that down, guys? No, that's not a solar flare. They straight up took that down.
Damn. So it seems like
that was CBS.
Oh, CBS did it.
Yeah. What's up with that? Why did they take that down? Why the hell did they take that down?
It's a good question.
That's insane. All right. That's a bit of a surprise, don't you think?
All right, on to the next one.
That was weird. That was very, very weird.
Very, very weird.
One really special one for me was celebrating New Year's with the crew. It was just really heartwarming. I don't know how else to put it.
Such a human event.
Yeah.
One of my favorite times. I liked all the times, but and I think.
That was crazy.
There were no children, and they were all receiving CCAP funding for separate daycares. There was one daycare we went to that one day it was closed by the government, and then that same day it was reopened underneath another name. They both received CCAP funding.
I bet, Ms. Larson, they probably weren't getting audited nearly.
I would guess not.
So how many daycares are there in Minneapolis we think are fraudulent right now? Ms. Shirley, any idea? Are the amount of money total? You got any idea on that?
Well, they've frozen over $185 million, and not a single has been in business yet.
It's $185 million for sure that we know. Mr. Dexter, I got a question for you. What common patterns or warning signs usually indicate that the provider or the program may be committing fraud? As you were doing your investigations and 28 years of experience, what are some of the indicators that you see that maybe that should be a telltale sign or a red flag that there's fraud there?
Well, one of the immediate signs that we saw when we would go out to first look at location is where that was located. A lot of times they were located in commercial areas, and I'm not talking like strip malls or anything like that. I'm talking about like industrial areas where you wouldn't typically find a child care center.
What's up, Kevin?
We would notice that there was no play area, and if there was any play equipment, it was bare minimum. Now, there was an exception that if there was a playground area within a very short walking distance, that would count. But a lot of times we didn't see that. But the most glaring thing was that when we watched the centers, we would sit and watch it for a couple of days before we even put up surveillance cameras. We would watch, and we would see little to no children present. If anything, there would be a few kids.
As you begin to blow the whistle, the investigator became
Gentleman's time has expired.
I'll yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Chair recognizes the ranking member, Ms. McGrath.
He began a second term, President Trump broke from historic norms and fired 17 inspectors general. Dogs and prevent waste, fraud, and abuse. A federal judge held that these firings were illegal, but also held that she could not reinstate these people due to their important roles. As a result, the president has been able to appoint acting inspectors general. Themselves have been removed after informing Congress that Trump officials are not cooperating with investigations. Mr. Hitler-Gaudette, how do these frequent firings affect the ability of the inspector general offices to prevent and investigate fraud?
I think they fundamentally undermine it, and they also create a real chilling effect for the inspector general who are left. The incentive to do something that could upset the powers that be suddenly becomes a bit of a risky proposition. And so between the completely undermining them and the chilling effect, you are really dampening and damaging the ability to do real oversight.
Thank you. And how does the politicization of inspector general appointments affect the morale and effectiveness of career investigative staff there within these offices?
It also has a severely negative effect on morale and efficacy within the offices.
So I believe we can and should do more to prevent that all of our government efforts are doing the most that they can to help the American people. When the Judiciary Committee marked up the Republicans' partisan big ugly spending bill, I offered an amendment that would dedicate half of 1% of funding to be used for oversight and fraud improvement and prevention. My Republican colleagues, they opposed the amendment. Mr. Hitler, Gaudet, you spoke on steps that Congress could take to ensure robust, nonpartisan. The Project on Government Oversight recently published an article, 7 Ways Congress Should Sharpen Its Oversight in 2026.
Without objection.
Thank you. Thank you. Is there anything else that you want to highlight from those recommendations?
Sure. Yeah, I just want to pause to note that Congress really is the indispensable actor when it comes to doing oversight. There's supposed to be a somewhat adversarial relationship between the branches, and Congress is supposed to be the primary adversary when it comes to branches and conducting oversight, but that is predicated on Congress taking that oversight duty seriously, irrespective of who is in charge of the other 2 branches. And so I think there's a political will issue there with oversight, but also there are some mechanical issues. So Congress could do a better job of holding hearing that are a bit more bipartisan, a bit more focused on the facts, as opposed to the sizzle of a given anecdote or scandal. I mean, really trying to get at root causes and really trying to take hard, deep looks at the underlying structural reasons why things like fraud happen. It's not as sexy. It's not going to get you as many views on social media, but it's going to actually ideally lead to long-term, sustainable, durable reforms that can really crack down on the problem.
Thank you. And so the short-lived Doge office was supposed to cut fraud. Mr. Hitler Gaudet, what did it actually do, and how did its actions actually affect everyday Americans?
So Doge was a complete failure. Even on its own terms, the primary progenitor of Doge claimed that he was going to find $2 trillion. Then he moved that down to $1 trillion in waste, fraud, and abuse cut spending. But in 2025, we actually spent more money than we spent in 2024. At the opening of this fiscal year in October, we ran the largest opening month budget deficit ever run before at $285 billion. We have hollowed out the key functions of a bunch of agencies. Any claim that Doge was effective either on cutting spending,
You get on Joker suit.
effectiveness or efficiency,
Trey
or just
joking.
flat out undermined and undercut by the facts.
And Mr. Hitler Gaudet, because you have done investigations yourself, did you do any follow-up on Mr. Shirley's video?
So personally, I took a look at some of what had been done to try and backstop what Mr. Shirley indicated in his video by professional journalists at CBS and by professional oversight practitioners like the Inspector General in Minnesota. And as it turns out, they had a difficult time substantiating what Mr. Shirley was claiming to be true in his video. And in fact, they found countervailing evidence, including having been provided security footage by one of those daycares of children being dropped off the very day that Mr. Shirley was supposedly there. So I think in my view, I would have to think I'd err on the side of believing the professional journalist at CBS and the professional oversight practitioners at the Inspector General office.
Thank you. I'm out of time. I yield.
Chair recognizes the gentlelady from Florida, Ms. Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And so on that note, I think it's important that we return to a discussion of how these investigations were conducted and the type of evidence that led to the discovery of this massive fraud. One thing that is clear based on the testimony today is that this is not just a Minnesota problem. This is a warning sign for every state that it is administering large-scale programs using taxpayer dollars. And we need to get to the bottom of how to identify this type of fraud and prevent it from continuing to occur. So, Mr. Dexter, I'd like to go back to your testimony, both what you have shared with us already about your extensive background investigating and analyzing program fraud and the methods that you used to identify the theft of taxpayer dollars in this particular type of case. In your written testimony, you mentioned that case selection and investigations were begun in part by looking at funding data. And I am interested in how your office would use things like funding data, use statistics, and other information and evidence to begin to develop these cases.
Well, it wasn't hard to find the funding amounts. We looked at the centers that received CCAP funds, and then we just we listed them out. We had what was originally referred to as the top 100 list, and it was based off of centers receiving the most CCAP funding, and that was generated through the billing process and the people that administer the funds.
And when you looked at that list, did it turn out that there were certain facilities that were outliers in some way, either because they were receiving a larger amount of funding based on student population that appeared typical, or because of where they were located? Tell us how you identified which facilities warranted further review.
Well, when we started looking at the centers that were receiving the most funds, the investigators were each assigned cases, were assigned centers, and we first started looking into what the billing pattern was, or what the billing amount was, how many children were being billed at these centers, and we would have centers that were billing for 120 plus children, and looking at the different days and times, kind of establishing a pattern that just was outside the realm of a typical daycare center.
So in other words, you used objective data and evidence as the foundation to proceed further with your investigations.
Yes, in order to start the investigation, that's what we would begin with.
And in your experience, wouldn't you also say that that is the typical method or atypical method for beginning and analyzing a potential fraud case of any nature in any community?
Yes, because in order to do the investigation, you first have to find out if it warrants an investigation and to what extent that investigation would be.
And now, isn't it also correct? You mentioned in your testimony systemic weaknesses that allowed the large scale
I'm going
fraud.
back to where I was at
Even
first
after
before it
you
cut
had
off.
developed substantial.
We got through the first month of the year, man. Damn.
What the heck? What's what I'm doing wrong?
Oh my word. Oh my word. I don't even know what to do. I might have to use a whole other streaming platform so that I can put like multiple screens on at the same time, so we could just watch everything simultaneously, because things are happening in real time simultaneously. Okay, there's another press conference that was done in regards to a person that was actually detained by ICE, claiming that she was assaulted. Right, that just happened while Trump is also dealing with, he's over dealing with this whole Greenland situation. We got the shooting that happened in Los Angeles. I mean, it is absolutely crazy.
Like and subscribe.
There's so much going on. So much.
Let's get to 1,000.
There's supposed to be a press conference. I don't know what for. Let's see what's going on here. Is this for that?
By Supervisory Special Agent Aaron Sears of the Federal Bureau of Investigation and Assistant U.S. Attorney Alex Sisler, who serves as the Deputy Chief of the Complex Fraud Section of my office. Earlier this afternoon, Todd Burkhalter of St. Petersburg, Florida, pled guilty to orchestrating what is one of the largest, if not the largest, Ponzi schemes in Georgia history. As the Chief Executive Officer...
We're going to have to look at that later. Oh, my God. And why does he look like Jason Schwartzman? Does anybody know who Jason Schwartzman is? Look him up. He looks like the actor could play him in a movie. But anyway, okay, we're going over to Trump. We got to see what's going on here. There's supposedly going to be a press conference, if I'm correct, about this shooting that happened in LA. When it's going to go down, I don't know yet. But this is all breaking right now as we speak, okay?
Vantage point that we have of President Trump as he is overseas at the World Economic Forum. Let's listen.
Greenland, really good. It's a win for America. Are the tariffs off the table completely now, sir? Can the people of the UK rest assured the deal's gone? Based on the fact that it looks like we have the concept of it. Is that more security in the Arctic, sir?
Mr. President, what does it mean for territory?
for your legacy, sir? What does it mean for your legacy to have Greenland?
I think it's a really good day for everybody. It's a great security for the nation. It's a deal that people jumped at. Really fantastic for the USA. Gets everything we wanted, including especially real national security and international security.
How so? Can you give us about whales, please?
Well, the deal is going to be put out pretty soon. We'll see. It's right now a little bit in progress, but pretty far along. It gets us everything we needed to get.
Will the U.S. still get Greenland, sir?
What did Mark Rutte say? Well, he's a great leader. I think he's fantastic. He's Secretary General. He's representing the other side, which is really us too, because he's a very important member of NATO. I've done a lot for NATO. And it's really nice. I mean, it's a deal that everybody's very happy.
Does it sound like the United States having ownership of Greenland like you said you wanted?
It's a long-term deal. It's the ultimate long-term deal. It puts everybody in a really good position, especially as it pertains to security and minerals.
So how important is it for your legacy?
Have you really spoken to other European leaders?
Yes, I have.
How long have you talked to your leaders?
Infinite.
Did you speak to Denmark? Did you speak to Denmark?
There's money involved. It's signed forever.
Will there be money involved?
It's a deal that's forever.
Will there be an effect anyway, Mr. President? Will there be an effect?
What happens is people are out there and they're working it right now. They're working the details of the deal. But it's what's called an infinite deal.
Will there be
Russia trying to come and take over Greenland? If you're worried that Putin would do something like that, why invite him to join your board of peace?
Because we want everybody. We want all nations. We want all nations where people have control, people have power. We're never going to have a problem. This is the greatest board ever assembled.
Well,
everybody wants to be on it. But yeah, I have some controversial people on it. These are people that get the job done. These are people that have tremendous influence. But all babies on the board, there wouldn't be very much. So he was invited. He's accepted. Many people have accepted. I don't know of anybody that hasn't accepted. But I think the Board of Peace will be the most prestigious board ever, and it's going to get
Right, Benny. Ice baby.
And we'll work with the United Nations, but the Board of Peace is going to be special. You have peace. It started off with Gaza and the Middle East. We got peace in the Middle East, tremendous peace in the Middle East. Nobody thought that was possible. And that happened by taking out the Iran nuclear threat. Without that, it could have never happened. But the board is going to be, I think, really fantastic. And I think it's been the most prestigious board of any board ever in world history. Thank you very much.
Mr. President, how important is it for you to have
Wow.
All right, as you see there, we did just lose that shot here on Live Now from Fox. That happens from time to time as we're in those live events and getting that feed as it comes to us. So we do know that President Trump has been spending the week there in Davos, Switzerland. He just arrived a little bit earlier on today, gave multiple speeches, and also took time to address reporters like he just did several times throughout the World Economic Forum. And so what we've really been waiting on is the latest here with Greenland. We just brought it to you as breaking news in the last hour ago with President Trump declaring that he had come to some sort of deal based off of those negotiations. I'm going to read off this Truth Social post there on your screen. It says, based upon a very productive meeting that I have had with the Secretary General of NATO, Mark Rutte, we have formed the framework of a future deal with respect to Greenland and, in fact, the entire Arctic region. This solution, if consummated, will be a great one for the United States of America and all NATO nations. Based upon this understanding, I will not be imposing the tariffs that were scheduled to go into effect on February 1st. Additional discussions are being held concerning the Golden Dome as it pertains to Greenland,
Further information will be made available as those discussions progress. Vice President J.D. Vance, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, and Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and various others, as needed, will be responsible for those negotiations. They will report directly to me. Thank you for your attention to this matter. And as you see from that gaggle that we were able to have and bring to you all right now from Fox, President Trump was asked a whole host of questions about Greenland and the statement that he just recently made.
I want to pause this so we can reread this again. So based upon a very productive meeting that I had with the Secretary General of NATO, Mark Rutte, we have formed the framework for the future deal, or of a future deal, with respect to Greenland and, in fact, the entire Arctic region. This solution, if consummated, will be a great one for the United States of America and all NATO nations. Based upon this understanding, I will not be imposing the tariffs. So that's what's up. We heard that as breaking news, but he's also said this in Truth Social. So he's like, hey, I will not impose these tariffs that were scheduled to go into effect on the 1st of February. Additional discussions are being held concerning the Golden Dome as it pertains to Greenland. Further information will be available as discussions progress. J.D. Vance, Mark Rubio, Steve Witkoff, and various others, as needed, will be responsible for the negotiations. They will report directly to me. Thank you for the attention to this matter. What's interesting about this is that he's not saying we're going to take it by force anymore. So he ain't saying that anymore. He's not going, hey, we're taking it by force whether you like it or not. He's still trying to make a deal happen. That deal better be sexy as hell. But here's the other thing, too. What's Greenland saying about this? What is Denmark, the kingdom of, what is Denmark saying about all this? Are they fine with this? So again, I don't know. That's very interesting, though. Very interesting, because remember, he was giving off the vibe that he was about to just go up there and steal that mug. Now it sounds like there's going to be some sort of negotiation going on, but is it really going to go the way that Trump wants? We will see.
Count. But ultimately, what we can take away is that President Trump announced today that he would not be following through on his threat to impose tariffs on 8 European allies. This was set to go into effect on February 1st over their opposition to his claim of Greenland. We do know that President Trump has already dropped his threat to invade Greenland by force earlier today and has now reversed his tariff, which triggered a crisis in the transatlantic alliance and rattled global markets as well. And so we do know, as said there on his statement, as he reiterated in some of those questions, he has now claimed to found a solution to the Greenland crisis. This was during that meeting with NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte. And so basically what we heard there, President Trump saying that this is going to be a great thing for the United States. We'll continue to keep our eyes on all of this as it unfolds. And in the meantime, we do want to take this opportunity to slide away for our first 2-minute commercial break of the hour. On the other side, though, much more.
Yeah, that's very fascinating. Very, very fascinating. So I want to show you guys this other press conference that just happened. Like I said, there's so much crap going on. I mean, like I said, I might have to use a whole other streaming platform just so I can have 15 different screens going on at the same damn time, because that's literally what we're at right now, because there's so much going on. But, there was another press conference. So a St. Paul resident said that ICE agents harassed and assaulted her during her arrest. Let's take a look at this press conference here. We're not going to play the whole thing, but, they usually give us the facts in the very beginning. So hopefully we'll find out the information now.
Great to be here with you all. Thank you for being here.
And of course, it's only coming out the left ear. Come on now.
Ahmed and her father's here with us, the family members that happened to the tragedy in St. Paul about a week ago.
Like and subscribe.
Hello, my name is Susie. Thank you. And over the last 2 weeks, my office has been receiving endless complaints from our community about civil rights violation on our streets and our community. We are hearing from U.S. citizens, parents, young people, and working family who say they have been stopped with no clarity cost and demanding to show their identity, whether they are citizens or whether they are here illegally or legally way in the state of Minnesota. Let me be clear, this is not a normal, it is unlawful, and it's not public safety. It is intimidation, harassment, and it looks like racial profiling for those people, black and brown, that has been detained in St. Paul and the state of Minnesota. Many of you have seen the video that's circling online about Nasra Ahmed. Nasra Ahmed is 23 years old, U.S. citizen, born here in Minnesota, raised in Minnesota. She was unjustly arrested by ICE and detained for 2 days with no legal representation, with no given a clear answer why she got arrested. Nasra just has been released, but she is not fine yet because she is shocked, devastated, traumatized, and she will never be the same until she got arrested. But what we experienced, it felt like a nightmare when I spoke with her, that she is not feeling the same person. She feels fear. She asks question herself whether she belongs in here or not, even though she was born in the United States of America.
Again, an American citizen, racially profiled, detained by ICE because of the color of her skin and possibly what she was wearing. They just automatically assumed that she was illegal when she wasn't. Insane.
She has been harassed because the way she looks like, the way she dressed. It was easy target to pick up because she is Somali American. But
Ice, baby, yes.
Whether she's born here, and she's been saying it clearly that I am citizen, I am born here in America, never seen in the country. This bigger than one case. Every single person reporting this incident,
this guy's tripping.
That's unacceptable. So today I'm saying clearly, this has to stop for the racial profiling that we've seen in our state of Minnesota. Targeting of black and brown community in Minnesota must end. No one should be treated like a criminal because of their skin color, because their name, because their accent, or the neighborhood that they live in. Because what ICE is doing, they're targeting Pacific community. They're targeting where immigrant people and people of color live in public housings. They're not targeting other individuals, but they're targeting for those people that Minnesota is better than this. We will not be silent. We will be demanding answer, and we will demand accountability for those people that's doing bad in our state. As a state legislator, and many of my colleagues here today, we will hold accountability for those hurting, for those people that, whether it's citizens or living in the state of Minnesota, we will be willing to protect. But now I would like to call Nasra Ahmed for her to testimony. Say a few words.
Is this my thing?
Yeah.
Hello. Okay, yeah, I just want to make sure I'm a little closer. Thank you so much. Hi,
Here comes the bullshit.
I'm very grateful to have this opportunity to speak in front of.
If they did that, go ahead and sue them then.
To my senator,
you have the right to sue.
The people behind me for
if that happened.
I can never be more grateful than I am right now. I'm not used to the attention and the fame, unwanted fame that I am receiving right now. My image is out there, but it's an image for a reason. It's an image that I will carry for the rest of my life. And I am proud. I am proud to say that I've survived ICE. I'm proud to say that I've stood up for what is right. And many people are saying, including my family and friends, that I will go down in history. And I will carry this on my shoulders. And I will carry it even though I am fearful. I am a bit anxious. I'm going to admit that I didn't expect this to happen. But here I am, speaking in front of everyone, and there's cameras recording me. Hi, everyone who's watching me right now. My name is Nazra. It's nice to meet you guys. It's nice to meet everyone.
I thought she was traumatized.
I'm from Minnesota. I also grew up in Columbus, Ohio, but I also grew up here, and I was also raised here.
I thought she was traumatized. She's smiling and shit. What the fuck is going on? This is the bullshit. Somalis, boy, they some slick motherfuckers, boy.
Raised in both cities. Both are well-known Somali communities. So I'm Somali. I'm proud to be Somali. To me, being Somali. Right.
What about being a fucking American? You didn't say a Somali American. At least say that. Damn.
It's a lot. It's like it's an interesting thing. It's very hard to describe what it means to be Somali and what it means to be American.
Oh, okay.
It's like
okay.
a cultural fusion. It's kind of like the bananas and rice. You know, people don't really see, like, you know, it's you know, people don't think, oh, you can eat bananas with rice, but that's what it's like to be Somali and American. It's like that combination of banana and rice, but you're gonna get what I mean. So what I'm trying to say is people might be confused by me being Somali, but then when they hear my voice, they say, this girl is very American. There's something American about her. So like my family says, you're so American. You're so American. There's something American about you. But then when other people see me, they're like, there's something Somali about you. You're really Somali, you know? So that's what it's like, you know?
I think that obviously you get the general idea on this. Of course, it is scary what she went through. Let's be real. So you're driving in your car, you're dressed how she's dressed, you look the way she looks. They instantly think that she's Somali. They don't even bother to go, hey, talk to her for a second, or check her papers, or check her ID, showing proof positive. It's not like she has some heavy accent that she just came here illegally. You see what I'm saying? She's definitely rambling. I mean, I definitely would be extremely terrified. If you're not somebody who's used to being on camera, if you're, you don't expect to be thrust into the spotlight like this, and being a victim of something so terrible. If you're not used to public speaking, you're gonna sound all over the place. The nerves are very much there. This is I appreciate them bringing this up and talking about it, and she should get the justice that she rightfully deserves. That's what I truly think. She most definitely deserves the justice that she rightfully deserves, and hopefully she will get that very soon. It's interesting. I have not yet seen anything about a press conference for the actual shooting that we saw, right? Or that we've been covering so far. I'm kind of waiting for that, but we haven't really seen anything yet. Hopefully there will be one here in the near future. House Democrats talk on, man, there's so much crap going on. Oh my God. Let's see what's going on here.
Some of those House Democrats also speaking out. So in the meantime, we do have yet another live event that has just come into our newsroom. We want to take you out to it right now. This is coming to us from Portland, Maine, as we're hearing from the city council members and other leaders there in the city on the presence of ICE. Let's listen in.
Damn.
respect the law. We challenge the need for a paramilitary approach to the enforcement of federal statutes. Federal immigration law is lawful. Its administration and enforcement is lawful. While we may dispute the basis for those laws, the fact remains, it is federal law. What we've been concerned with as a council is the enforcement tactics that ICE has undertaken in other communities, which to our mind appear to threaten and intimidate populations. If they change the way they do their business, then we can focus on doing our responsibility as citizens and changing policy through our elected officials. So this council doesn't stand apart from our immigrant communities, but we stand with them. As a reminder, the Portland Police Department does not involve itself in the enforcement of civil administrative violations under federal immigration statute. As police officers, if there is a call for support to life or serious bodily injury, no matter who the agency or individual is, we will respond as we would to any one of you calling 911. That is our duty in terms of public safety. I'll interrupt for a moment. Councilor Fournier, you can join us up here.
Yep, I should have left due.
Community, and that has come in the form of text or phone calls or shared videos, so we know they're there. I will remind the public, allow officers to do their work, do not obstruct. The best thing you can do is to be the best possible witness should the facts that come before you not need any future investigation or judicial inquiry. All right, if officers are acting with warrant, they are within the law. And this is not the place or the time to challenge that. I want everyone safe. Interrupting law enforcement action is a risk of conduct. It may feel an appropriate moment, but it could lead to outcomes neither party wished upon each other when they began the transaction. So I want to make that clear. I also respect the right to dissent, to protest, to express your misgivings or rejection of current government policy. If all of you decide to do that, our police department has demonstrated exemplary history in protecting that expression of constitutional right, and will continue to do so. Before I came out here, someone came in and said, if we did a protest, we'll be safe. And I assured him that the Portland Police Department would do its job as it always has, impartially and professionally. The other concern we had about ICE arriving, and I put it this way as a former member of law enforcement, what Mayor Shalene and I expect is that federal agencies and their agents will conduct themselves in a professional manner, respect the rule of law, and treat our citizens without the use of provocation. Exercise the restraint.
All right, as you see, they're listening in to those officials in Portland, Maine, addressing some of the ICE operations that are happening. We're
Not
going to play out
surprised,
the
though.
remainder of those remarks for you, but right now, stepping up to the microphone, we have to head back to Capitol Hill as we're hearing from Representative Culver speaking after there he was holding that meetings on holding the Clintons in contempt. Let's listen in.
Oh boy, here we go.
Files it's supposed to. It's my understanding the Attorney General is going to, once they're redacted. Now we have seen the Attorney General comply with our subpoena. Turned over documents, as I said numerous times today, and I've said numerous to most of the networks that are here today. We would like for the pace to pick up. We want to get the documents. We're not going to let her off the hook, but from a legal standpoint, she is complying with the law, and we expect to get the documents very soon.
In addition to your subpoena, though, are you concerned that she?
Yeah, we say don't hurt nobody either, but don't be in their way, be doxing them, following them around.
Again,
People stay at home and start following them.
Is a Judiciary Committee thing. They put a date on it. She's going to be in front of the Judiciary Committee in 2 weeks. And I think that's the important thing with what the Democrats were trying to say today about Bondi. And look, no one on our side defended Bondi. Let me be very clear. No one.
My thing is this: Obama, the reporter-in-chief, had he had ICE agents as well, and the ICE agent did the same thing. I'm thinking about it is the media didn't push what's going on now. The media didn't push it. Now they pushing it because it's Trump involved. Trump wasn't involved. We hear nothing about ICE. Nobody doxing. Nobody following. None of that. Nothing about putting the mask on. None of that stuff. Because the Trump in office, they going crazy.
On our side, dependent body, but we have to recognize there are a lot of documents. They produced documents, I think, of 2 different document drops. The first one, the Democrats complained there were not enough redactions. In the second drop, they complained there were too many redactions. So, numbers range from several 100,000 to several million.
Like and subscribe.
That's a lot of eyes that are going to have to be over it and review it to try to make the redactions, because the victims have made it clear to us that they want anything pertaining to their privacy redacted. And that's the impression I'm under that the Department of Justice is trying to do.
Mr. Chairman, is it important? Is there still an opportunity for the Clintons to negotiate some sort of satisfaction of the subpoena, even though you've taken the step of?
There's always an opportunity. It's going to be 2 weeks before this is on the floor. We're going to have to notice this is going to be treated like any other bill. We're making sure every I is dotted and every T is crossed, because they have a very expensive legal team. So obviously there are going to be a couple of more days this week, depending on the weather. Then there'll be 3 days notice, and then we can vote on it. I've been assured we're going to vote on it. So that's 2 weeks, because we're going to be off a week. They're going to have 2 weeks that they're going to theoretically be able to negotiate. But one thing that I want to make very clear, a lot of what the Democrats were saying today, and I'm not accusing the Democrats on the committee of lying. I'm accusing the lawyers for the Clintons of not being truthful. They were not in good faith negotiating. They never made a proposal where there would be an actual transcript. And I don't think anyone in the media would accept any type of interview without a transcript. Then you're going to have notes, and it's going to be Clinton's word against my word, Garcia's word against my word. That's no good. But, there should be a recorded, at the very least, transcript, if not audio and video. I would argue all 3 of the deposition. That is the law. That is what is considered legal in court. And I don't think anyone in the media would argue against that. So, yes.
Thank you, Governor.
Yeah, turn on the hill right now. So it's up ahead. Convoy. Mandel, yeah. If the cars have turned, this car in front is not a protester, so we can capture it. He's on, he said he was over this way. Is he with the convoy? I don't know. Thanks for the super chat. Can't turn this car, it's just hold on. Your stuff.
What's up, Rockets? Chilling. LA had a shooting with some ice involved.
Somebody might have taken it. I think somebody literally stole my camera. Where the windows down. Was in trouble.
Somebody stole his camera. I'm working on something here on my end while this is going on. This is insanity. I think they're trying to go to another gas station.
It's not safe. Thanks, drive.
Yeah, okay. Thanks, guys.
It's also not safe to leave Kevin out in the street, so we got to find.
Have a brother out, like and subscribe.
Just Milk Jam Creamery, 2743 Linden.
I know, I can't. It's right here, so. What I mean?
Let's see where they go. Insanity, folks.
Jump in.
Come on.
Hurry up.
I'm gonna go at Cam Hake because I think his feed is a little bit better.
Yeah, this is real. Yeah, this is right now.
Quincy must be on a different provider or something like that. And they had somebody jump in the car with them, so I don't know what the deal is with that, so we'll see. Keep circle. Crazy.
That's on the back of the drone. What's up, chat? I still see them. So we are tailing, trying to.
Thank you, QA.
We've been tailing it pretty
Name
much
is
all day
Deunta.
because we've
Thank
got
you.
these protesters. Yes, 100% is good. So we've been these protesters. All these protesters in front of us are tailing the convoy, and there's like a quadrillion of them. And then people need to stop calling me. Everybody stop calling me.
Thank you.
They all think we're ICE too, which is a problem because they're all screwing with us. Convoy's ahead of us. We got a bunch of cars behind us. Everyone's honking. It's me, Kevin Sobek, and Quincy, BC Preacher. So earlier, Bavino got out of his car. They got out of the convoy, and they stopped at a gas station. They actually stopped at 2 gas stations. I got some really good shots of them. And they started, they went in and they got some Slim Jims and stuff, and the protesters just totally mobbed them, hundreds of them, and dozens of cars. And so it was nuts. It was crazy. Bavino, they dumped a bag of chips on Bavino. He ended up having to push somebody. Another agent pushed another person pretty good, and then that person started twerking on the agent. He's rolling with BORTAC and Border Patrol. I didn't see any ICE with him. So it's getting pretty rowdy out here. We followed him from this convoy. And when I say convoy, I mean the BORTAC agent. I mean the protesters as well. That Prius in front of us is a protester. There's like 20 cars behind us. This convoy's been going. It's like Powderhorn Park for 2 hours. They caught him up on Cedar and started honking their horns. But Vino is the commander at large for Border Patrol. Commander at large for Border Patrol. Cam, you need a knight in shining armor outfit. I was the knight in shining armor in your movie.
Yeah, I apologize for that. Apologize. I've been focusing on something else a minute. Somebody were like, it's a few minutes behind. Sorry about that, folks. I had something else. I was getting text by somebody, and I was just trying to navigate through that, so I wasn't paying attention. So yeah, they proceeded significant distance. I don't know what's going on here, but I got something going on here on my end. So I think with that being said, I'm going to sound off. But I strongly recommend go over to Black Conservative Preacher and or Cam Higby to follow where this goes. We'll see, but obviously this is some sort of it's a diversion for sure what Border Patrol is doing. But I'm also seeing something else that's popping up too.
Were of Somali ancestry. So, under the pretext of cracking down on a fraud that had already been discovered, investigated, and prosecuted, Trump surged federal immigration officers to Minnesota and aimed them at the Somali American communities, calling the people who live there. This is despite the fact that it is a complete non sequitur, obviously, to send immigration agents to conduct fraud investigations. And the deployment of law enforcement resources against an entire ethnic community after the criminal prosecution of a small group of its members is to promote the sinister ideas of collective guilt and guilt by association, two doctrines that are emphatically rejected in Anglo-American jurisprudence and by our courts. The community targeted in Minneapolis is made up, incidentally, overwhelmingly of U.S. citizens. 95% of Somalis in Minnesota are U.S. citizens, including 58% of whom were born in the United States. Well, what is the Trump administration's actual record on fraud? Well, let's see. President Trump pardoned the big-time drug dealer, Juan Orlando Hernandez, the former president of Honduras, sparing him a 45-year criminal sentence after he brought in 400 tons of cocaine into our country. That's 800,000 pounds of cocaine that he said, quote, "We are going to stuff up the nostrils of the gringos." And Trump pardoned him. And if you're interested in that particular sweetheart deal, that would be a great subject for a hearing, Mr. Chairman. Just last week, again, the president granted pardons to more convicted fraudsters. Julio Herrera Vellatini was scheduled to be sentenced this month for participation in a political corruption and fraud scheme alongside his co-defendant, the former governor of Puerto Rico, Wanda Vasquez. In late 2024, Mr. Herrera was facing felony bribery charges. In a different case, his daughter donated $2.5 million to the MAGA Inc. Super PAC. Then in May 2025, Mr. Herrera's lawyer, who had served on President Trump's legal team, negotiated a deal allowing him to plead guilty to a trivial misdemeanor offense instead. Several months later, Mr. Herrera's daughter donated another $1 million to MAGA Inc. And what do you know? President Trump generously granted Mr. Herrera a full and unconditional pardon just last week. They're making a fraud out of the pardon process in America with pay-to-play rules as they pardon recidivist, hardened, unrepentant fraudsters.
What about Joe Biden auto pen?
Indeed, in total, President Trump has pardoned more than 1,600 people, depriving victims, survivors, and taxpayers of an estimated, check this out, $1.55 billion in restitution and fines owed to us, the American people, while shockingly, because other presidents didn't do this, but Trump did, while shockingly allowing corporate fraudsters and tax cheats to keep all of their ill-gotten gains. This is a massive and unprecedented swindle from working-class people and crime victims as the administration gives all of these ill-gotten gains right back to the criminal fraudsters who stole the money in the first place. And finally, Mr. Chairman, President Trump has dismantled the infrastructure that actually prosecutes crime and fraud in America, actually roots out waste, fraud, and abuse. The Trump DOJ gutted the public integrity section at DOJ that prosecutes government officials who break the law. And nearly a year ago, his DOJ suspended enforcement of the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, which prohibits foreign bribery, saying all bets are off. He's gutted the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which is the first and the only agency devoted solely at the federal level to protect American consumers against being cheated by big financial corporations. The CFPB delivered $21 billion back to more than 200 million Americans who were victims of fraud and other predatory business practices. And the administration has been gutting the CFPB because they are on the side of corporate fraud and white-collar crime. That's the truth of what's going on there. They fired 17 inspectors general, the independent government watchdogs, whose job it is actually to root out waste, fraud, abuse, and corruption, and left 28 IG offices without Senate-confirmed leadership at all, allowing the corruption and the fraud to run rampant. So if we're going to have a hearing about fraud in America, Mr. Chairman, let's do it. Let's take in the full scope of what's taking place in our country. I yield back to you.
Gentleman yields back. I now recognize the chairman of the entire committee, Mr. Jordan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be brief. I want to thank our witnesses for being here. Estimates are potentially as high as $9 billion here in what appears to be a decade-long scam, fraud. You know, I always look at one program I talked about a couple weeks ago in an oversight hearing was this Feeding Our Future program, where
like and subscribe. Thanks for joining in.
Americans' hard-earned tax dollars taking that money.
This they got Nick Shirley testifying.
Meals to children. Problem was there were no meals and no kids. just stuffing it in their pockets. So I think this is a great hearing to have. We appreciate the witnesses and the work that they've done. Ms. Larson and the work she does and actually making a difference, doing a legitimate program. Mr. Shirley for uncovering this, and Mr. Dexter and others who are here. So with that, I would yield back and look forward to hearing from our witnesses in the hearing itself.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I recognize myself for just some UCs. The first one is President Joe Biden commutes sentences for two of Chicago area's most notorious fraudsters. North Dakota judge blasts Biden for setting fraudsters free. Biden commutes roughly 1,500 sentences, pardons 39 in biggest single-day act of clemency. Fraudsters. Illinois lawmakers furious after Biden commutes sentences of state fraudsters. Without objection. Now,
Mr. Chairman, could I enter some as well?
Yeah, please.
Thank you much. This UC request is from ABC News, January 20, 2026, titled Trump's Pardons Forgive Financial Crimes That Came with Hundreds of Millions of Dollars in Punishment. This one is Arizona has recovered just 5% in a $2.5 billion Medicaid fraud scheme. That's ProPublica. Columbus Dispatch. Columbus mother and daughter among 15 indicted in pandemic unemployment assistance fraud scheme. And finally, a Minnesota fraud scheme timeline from NPR News. Fraud investigation stretched across Walz's tenure.
Without objection. And now, without objection, all other opening statements will be included in the record, and we will introduce today's witnesses. Mr. Scott Dexter. Mr. Dexter is a former law enforcement officer, having served for 28 years. He also served with the Minnesota Department of Human Services Office of Inspector General, where he investigated fraud in the Child Care Assistance Program. Thank you, Mr. Dexter, for being here. And Ms. Jennifer Larson. Ms. Larson is the founder and chief executive officer of the Holland Center for Autism, a clinic that provides services to children and young adults with autism. Started the Holland Center to serve families like hers that were not receiving adequate services and support elsewhere. Thank you, Ms. Larson, for being here today. Mr. Nick Shirley is an independent journalist. His recent investigations and videos have shed light on the scale of fraud in public benefit programs in Minnesota that are currently ongoing. And thank you, Mr. Shirley, for being here. And Mr. Dylan Hetler-Gaudet. Mr. Hetler-Gaudet is the acting vice president of policy and government affairs at the Project on Government Oversight. POGO is a nonprofit organization that investigates alleged wrongdoing by the governor. Thank you, Mr. Hetler-Gaudet, for being here with us today. We welcome all our witnesses and thank them for appearing today. We will begin by swearing you in. Would you please rise and raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is true and correct to the best of your knowledge, information, and belief, so help you God? Thank you. Thank you. You may be seated. The record will reflect that the witnesses have all answered. At the instruction of Mr. Hetler-Gaudet, I wanted to let all members of the panel know that when you have questions for him, please say his name so he knows that you are addressing him.
Like and subscribe. Thank you guys for joining in.
I want the witnesses to know that your written testimony will
Let's
be
go, Nick.
into the record in its entirety. Accordingly, we ask that you summarize your testimony in 5 minutes, and we'll begin now with Mr. Dexter. You are recognized for your 5-minute statement.
Thank you. Chair, members of the community, thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. My name is Scott Dexter. I'm a retired law enforcement investigator with 28 years of experience, most of it spent conducting criminal and financial fraud investigations, with experience in surveillance operations. In 2013, after retiring from law enforcement, I joined the Minnesota Department of Human Services as part of a newly created investigative unit within the Office of Inspector General. Our mission was straightforward: identify and investigate fraud within the Child Care Assistance Program, known as CCAP. I was one of the original 4 investigators hired, all of us former law enforcement professionals with backgrounds in criminal investigations. Our cases were not selected based on the name of the center, the owner, or the community it served. They were selected based solely on tips, complaints.
Thank you guys staying with me. Hour and a half in. Appreciate you guys. Thank you.
The highest funded centers
Like and
were
subscribe.
reviewed first. And many of those centers were referred to us through the public tip line or by licensing inspectors who observed activity inconsistent with a legitimate daycare operation. What we found was deeply concerning. Many of these centers operated out of commercial spaces with windows totally covered, no visible play areas, and very few children ever present. Through surveillance, data collection, and review of attendance and billing records, we repeatedly documented patterns of overbilling, non-existent attendance, and in some cases, children being signed in for hours they were never actually at the center. Our investigative process was thorough and methodical. We collected licensing and billing data, installed covert surveillance cameras, reviewed hours of video, identified parents and employees, and calculated estimated overpayments based on actual attendance. Completed cases were then turned over to the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension for search warrants, interviews, arrests, and potential prosecution. As our investigations progressed, we noticed a trend. Many of the centers receiving the highest levels of CCAP funding were owned and operated by Somali individuals, and the families served were predominantly Somali. This was not the basis for selecting cases, but it did become the basis for accusations against us. We were labeled as racially biased, despite the fact that our case selection was driven entirely by funding data. An outside review was launched into our investigative practices. We were questioned about how we selected centers and how we conducted surveillance. Following that review, new restrictions were placed on our work, including mandatory panel reviews before we could move forward with investigations. Investigators were also pulled from conducting new or current investigations in order to enter data from all previous complaints received by DHS into a newly created database, a process that took nearly a year to complete. These changes significantly hindered our ability to do our jobs effectively. Ultimately, in 2019, I chose to retire because the investigative process had become so constrained that meaningful work was no longer possible. Through collaboration with federal agencies, including the IRS Criminal Investigation Division, Homeland Security, and the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, we learned that millions of dollars in cash from the Somali community was being flown out of the Minneapolis-St. Paul airport by Somali couriers. At one point, nearly $70 million had been documented leaving the country halfway through a single year. Although we could not prove that the cash was obtained fraudulently, we strongly suspected that it was. We also encountered situations where federal partners were prevented from opening cases due to concerns about political sensitivities surrounding the Somali community and the refugee resettlement program. These decisions had real consequences, allowing fraud to continue unchecked. Throughout our work, we identified several loopholes that made CCAP highly vulnerable to fraud. Centers were allowed to bill for the full authorized hours, even when children were present for only minutes. Billing records could be submitted up to 30 days later, creating opportunities for manipulation. Attendance records were handwritten, unreliable, and often incomplete. And despite our recommendations, no biometric attendance systems, no electronic submission requirements, and no state-installed security cameras were ever implemented. Chair and members, the purpose of my testimony is not to cast blame on any community. It is to highlight systemic weaknesses that allowed large-scale fraud to occur and to emphasize the need for stronger safeguards, better oversight, and investigative processes that are allowed to function without political interference. Thank you for your time and your commitment to ensuring accountability within publicly funded programs. And I am prepared to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Dexter. And now we're going to recognize Mr. Hetler-Gaudette for your 5 minutes of opening statement.
Chairman Biggs, Ranking Member McBath, and members of the subcommittee. I appreciate the opportunity to testify before you today on the important issues of preventing fraud and protecting taxpayer dollars. My name is Dylan Hetler-Gaudette, and I am the Acting Vice President of Policy and Government Affairs at the Project on Government Oversight. We are a nonpartisan, independent watchdog that promotes a more accountable, transparent, and effective federal government. We view it as our mission to combat abuse of power and corruption in the federal government, which includes working on rooting out waste, fraud, and abuse. The unfortunate truth is that fraud in government programs is a fact of life. Since the United States government has existed, fraud in government has also existed. For much longer than that, in fact. For as long as human beings have been organizing ourselves into societies and building institutions to govern those societies, there have always been those who will seek to take advantage. This is a harsh but real truth related to the human condition related to our fundamentally fallen and flawed natures. That said, it is still incumbent upon every one of us to do what we can to prevent fraud and to hold perpetrators of fraud accountable. This is especially true when the fraud implicates hard-earned taxpayer dollars and critical public programs and services. This is true whether we're talking about fraud in the context of the
Like and subscribe. Thanks for joining in.
Program in Minnesota, whether we're talking about welfare fraud in Mississippi, which involved the participation of a world-famous Hall of Fame NFL quarterback. This is true whether we're talking about fraud in the context of it being perpetrated by large multinational defense companies in the context of multi-billion-dollar contract they have with the Defense Department. The point here is that fraud and the abuse of taxpayer dollars is not related to any particular geographic, demographic, or other boundary or characteristic. But why do these things happen so much? Mostly they are caused by deep structural flaws, gaps, and weaknesses in our system of government. They're also driven by recalcitrance and resistance to change on the part of federal agencies. To put it shortly, fraud is a systemic problem.
Yeah, having on glasses in court,
solutions.
not taking it serious.
So
Or the hearing, how you want to call it?
Share a few of them with you today. We must first look at watchdogs, critical sources of information, and practitioners of oversight from within the federal government itself. I'm specifically talking about inspectors general, the Government Accountability Office, and whistleblowers. Rather than attacking, firing, undermining, and intimidating these individuals and entities as this administration and its allies have done, we must strengthen, preserve, and protect them. We must enact reforms to make sure that IGs and GAO can perform their duties effectively and independently. And we must add additional safeguards to make sure that whistleblowers can blow the whistle without fear of reprisal or retaliation. We must also take a long, hard look at the architecture currently in place for how we track, monitor, analyze, and assess federal funding. To put it bluntly, that architecture is broken. Key resources like USAspending.gov are in desperate need of overhaul and modernization. We need to enhance and improve the quantity, quality, timeliness, and integrity of the data and information we collect on federal funding. We need to promote more accountability, transparency, and compliance mechanisms within the chain of spending for federal funding. If we don't do this, we will never have a good grasp on where funding is going, where it's ending up, who is being helped by it, who is being missed by it, and what the ultimate impact is. Lastly, we must enact robust reforms and vigorous enforcement to crack down on corruption, cronyism, and conflicts of interest, which turbocharge waste, fraud, and abuse in the federal government. The presidential pardon is an acute example of this, with each of the last two administrations using the pardon power inappropriately to pardon convicted fraudsters. We must also promote reforms to crack down on the revolving door between agencies and industries.
Right, Christ.
And head off pay-to-play politics. Up decisions like the award of federal contracts. The takeaway here is simple. Focusing on individuals' salacious, scandalous examples of fraud is akin to looking at the symptoms and not looking at the disease or the root causes of the disease. The Project on Government Oversight stands ready, willing, and able to work with anyone here who wants to work on root causes and systemic solutions so that we can actually get our hands around waste, fraud, abuse, and corruption in the federal government. Thank you for having me here today, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Hedlegata. And I forgot to mention, when you get about 10 seconds left, I will just tip that so everybody will know that as well. So, Mr. Shirley, you're recognized for your opening statement.
Awesome. I'm here today to speak on behalf of all hardworking, law-abiding, tax-paying citizens here inside of the United States. I've helped bring to light widespread fraud that's happening inside our nation, and we the people have had enough of our hard-earned money going towards fraudsters as if it's no big deal. As I speak here, I want to ask everyone a question. How much do we trust when we pay our taxes it's going to benefit our nation? People erupted during the Boston Tea Party over just a few percentages as they believe they were being taxed without representation. Nowadays, we have the representation, but do we trust our representatives? My name is Nick Shirley, and I made a 41-minute video that I posted on platforms like X and YouTube. My video received over 100 million views, and it created instant change within our government. As the federal government launched investigations in departments such as Health and Human Services, froze over $185 million in childcare funding until businesses can prove they are legitimate businesses. I actually became aware of the fraud that was happening in Minnesota in June of 2025, as I was there for a separate video, and Minnesotans started reaching out to me, asking me if I was making a video on the fraud. I said, well, what fraud? And this lady, she was a real estate agent, and she says, well, I'm having a hard time selling my properties because people are curious about these assisted livings that are popping up next door to some of the houses that we're buying, or the home health care clinics that are popping up, and we don't know who's next to these houses that we're trying to sell. And I said, well, I'm not going to come and make a video if I don't have any proof. So therefore, I left Minnesota, and I continued to look for fraud in the best way I could.
Right, tax
and as I was getting my own information,
everything's
a man by the
taxed.
name of David reached out to me, and he said, hey, I have been investigating this fraud for years now. I have been driving by these child care centers. I've never seen a single child, and I have received information from the state of Minnesota as to how much money these places are receiving. I said, great, let me come to Minnesota and we'll make this video about potential fraud that was taking place inside of Minnesota. We go to a daycare, and I'm instantly surprised by what we see. We arrived, and it was an industrialized building, and there was 2 daycares registered at that daycare, at that building. And the first thing I noticed is all the windows are blacked out, and there's no footprints in the snow of any children. There's no playgrounds or anything that would make it look like it's a child care. But above me, a sign read, open 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. But there was nobody there. The doorbell did not even work. And then we continued to go to other daycares, and we noticed the same pattern. No children, blacked out windows, and one daycare, a learning center, spelled Quality Learning Center instead of Quality Learning Center. They had received $1.9 million, yet with that $1.9 million, they could not even spell Leering right on their sign. Governor Walz has said he's been fighting fraud in Minnesota since 2019 and said the buck stops with him. However, how long would it take for you to notice $1 million leaving your bank account and not knowing where it's going? That's essentially what had been happening in Minnesota for years, as billions of dollars have been misplaced. And meanwhile, while people like Governor Tim Walz call people like me a white supremacist, delusional conspiracy theorist, he actually decided to drop out of re-election because I believe of how deep and extensive this fraud is. Thank you very much. Since my reporting, the HHS department froze over $185 million, and to this day, not a single business has been able to prove proof of legitimacy. How fast would you be proving that you are a legitimate business if you have children to actually feed and to take care of? You'd be sending in that paperwork instantly. I made this video to document the widespread fraud that has been taking place, as I truly believe all fraud is bad, and people like
Critical,
me,
what's up?
my generation,
Yeah.
we're sick of seeing tax dollars go towards fraud. We just want to have the same opportunities that our fathers and our grandparents had, and when you see people making millions of dollars by committing fraud, it upsets everybody from all age demographics. And so I hope today we can have a good conversation, and I think we can all agree that fraud is bad and that fraud is fraud. And I wish the best for our country, and I think that's what needs to be happening, is to crack down on all forms of fraud. So thank you for having me, and God bless the USA.
Thank you, Mr. Shirley. And now I recognize Ms. Larson for your 5-minute opening statement.
Chairman, ranking member, and members of the committee, thank you for allowing me to speak today on this issue. My name is Jennifer Larson. I'm the founder and CEO of Holland Center in Minnesota. I've been an autism provider for over 20 years and started the organization for my son. I built Holland Center because families with children like mine were desperate for help.
Like and subscribe,
Desperate for somewhere they could trust their child would be supported and helped, not sent home on a bad day, not babysat in a classroom and forgotten. We serve the children that don't succeed in public school settings. What started as a small program grew over 2 decades into 4 locations that families rely on, not just for therapy, but for hope, routine, and survival. This work is a labor of love for me. Just like me, there are providers all over the state laboring with love to help these children. And this week, Holland and other programs all over Minnesota are collapsing. Not because we committed fraud, but because a crime ring was allowed to operate inside Minnesota's service system, and the government's clumsy response is now destroying legitimate, long-standing providers and devastating families that we serve. Families come to Holland, they do not have a backstop. Their children often receive 30 or more hours of therapy a week. These are not an
Imagine trying to defend fraud, right? That shit
These
crazy.
children learn to communicate, regulate their emotions, reduce dangerous behaviors, and function in daily life. For many parents, therapy determines if they can work. Consistent staff and therapy prevents severe behaviors and regression. Structured care keeps children and their siblings safe. When services disappear, families do not just simply adjust. They face a crisis. For more than 2 decades, Holland has served hundreds of children year after year, employed hundreds of clinicians and staff, operated under yearly on-site audits, inspections, and documentation oversight, delivered real services to real children every day.
Thank you.
We've always complied with everything the system required. Yet, within the last month, the state has withheld over $400,000 in Medicaid funds for my own program, and that number grows every single day. I had to infuse my personal funds to survive these weeks, but can't do that any longer without payment. Let me be clear. We are a fee-for-service industry. When we can't pay our staff, we lose our staff and children lose care. Families do not lose appointments. They lose the people they trust. What happened in Minnesota had nothing to do with the ethical, long-standing autism providers. What did happen was organized criminal networks that exploited autism services by opening fake centers, billing for children that did not exist, billing for services never delivered, and stealing millions of taxpayer dollars in the process.
Right, TV,
These
they
are
don't
not
care, man.
minor compliance issues.
Straight corrupt.
They are criminal enterprises. Families trusted that the
Gotta
government
vote these
would
people
protect
out of
the
there.
integrity of the system.
Vote them out.
It failed. Now, instead of doing the obvious thing and targeting criminal actors, the response has been to freeze everyone's payments. That decision does not punish the criminals. It punishes innocent children and families. As Medicaid payments are delayed due to prepayment review
you're right, TV.
by an insurance company that is in the business of denying claims, providers are reducing hours, cutting staff, and starting to close. Families are scrambling for alternatives that don't exist. Children are regressing. Parents are leaving jobs to care for their disabled children. Autism therapy cannot be paused without consequences. Loss of services can erase years of progress in weeks, and abrupt disruption of services can cause lifelong consequences in these children. This is not abstract harm. It is daily trauma for families already carrying an extraordinary burden. The simple solution to the problem: send the criminals to jail and allow trusted providers with decades of clean audits and verified ownership structures to continue providing prescribed ethical therapy and go back to paying them what we've earned and resume paying them on time. I built Holland for 20 years. Families built their lives around the care that we provide. All of that is risk of destruction today, not by fraud, but by clumsy government response that failed to distinguish between criminals and caregivers. It treats children with disabilities.
The gentlelady will suspend. We've got a photographer there. We allow photographers in here, but not between the panel of the witnesses and the members. You will please move.
Okay.
Move back.
Photographer, please move.
Thank you.
Like right now.
Damn.
Okay. Sorry.
Well,
All of that is at the risk of destruction. Sorry, can I continue?
Yeah, please continue.
Not by fraud, but the clumsy government response that fails to distinguish between criminals and caregivers. It treats children with disabilities as acceptable collateral damage. Fraud must be stopped and criminals prosecuted. I'm a taxpayer. I live in Minnesota. This is disgusting. But families and children should never pay the price for government failure. Thank you.
We will now proceed under the 5-minute rule with questions. Chair recognizes the gentleman from Wisconsin, Mr. Tiffany, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Besides the work Mr. Shirley has done, I want to recognize Powerline, who has done yeoman's work exposing this over the last decade, what has happened. And I just want to say, Ms. Larson, I live in northern Wisconsin. There's an autism school that was started in my community. Where did we visit when we wanted to start that a decade ago? We came to Minnesota where you have been leaders in having good autism programs. And I think about the tremendous fraud that has gone on in nutrition programs, housing programs, but is there anything more heinous than abusing an autism program?
I can't imagine. It's so hard to believe that people are faking the children have autism and stealing money from the government. When I'm sitting here with my 25-year-old non-speaker, and now children like my son aren't going to have services because they stole money from the government and faked these things. And it's just, it is, like I said, disgusting.
With what's going on right now, what are the families that you're serving? What are they saying?
They're scared.
What are they doing?
Everybody's scared. There are centers programs that have already shut down. Staff are leaving. I, this week, asked my staff who will take unpaid leave because we can't keep going like this. I'm like I said, I'm 400,000 plus in debt now, and I'm not sure these are going to get paid back. I went to a bank and they wouldn't back the receivable because they said that's not a receivable. If it's prepayment review, you may not get it.
And Ms. Larson, none of this would have happened if the fraud did not occur. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Mr. Dexter, could have something been done about this earlier?
Yes, as I stated in my opening testimony, in the years that I worked there, we identified how fraud was occurring, the loopholes that existed, and
What were some of the warning signs, Mr. Dexter?
Well, the fact that part of our job was to go and collect attendance records. We would find attendance records that were either incomplete, non-existent. Obviously, there were times we found them to be fabricated because they were given to us way later. And the same with billing records. They were allowed 30 days after the end of the billing period to submit billing records. So they were not immediately available to us. And it kind of allowed overpayments or double payments to be overlooked. So we had the attendance record issue. We had
right.
The fact
lock these people up, man. They did the January 6th people. Lock these people up. What the hell?
No way to verify what times those children were signed in and out.
Could I do a follow-up here? In Wisconsin, we learned this month that Ibrahimia Diab, a Minneapolis school finance boss, placed on leave for failing to submit required financial paperwork with the Minneapolis School District and for signing questionable contracts linked to the Somali fraud scandal, was hired by the Milwaukee Public School System as a deputy superintendent at a salary of $240,000 a year.
TV, you hitting on the nail, TV.
A warning sign that this person was involved, may have been involved with fraud in Minneapolis. Shouldn't they be concerned in Wisconsin that that they're hiring someone like that?
Well, if somebody that they hire has a past history and practice of doing that type of stuff, I would be very leery of it occurring again, or that being the basis that they're hired.
So
yeah, I wish we had got Matt Gates instead of Pam Bondi.
And is blocking federal audits of our food stamp and Medicaid programs. And he also vetoed 4 auditor positions in a recent budget. Do you think that is also a warning sign?
Yes, if it's preventing
or ill-advised, would that be a better way to pose the question?
Yeah, if it prevents the oversight and the ability to audit and look at the records to make sure can have a check and balance system, I think that'd be very unwise because again, that allows fraud to occur.
Because Mr. Shirley, what is happening in Minnesota, it could be happening throughout the United States. Isn't that correct?
Correct.
If there's one thing we've learned or leered, as they say in Minneapolis, isn't it possible that this is happening everywhere?
Yes, I believe it is.
Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman yields. I now recognize the ranking member of the whole committee, Mr. Raskin, for his 5 minutes of question.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank all the witnesses for your excellent testimony. Mr. Hedler-Gaudet, the administration has systematically undermined government oversight. The president has fired more than a dozen inspectors general, not for any cause, but seemingly just in retaliation for doing their jobs and to block unwanted investigations. President Trump has defunded the Council of Inspectors General on Integrity and Efficiency. He's removed independent leadership at the Office of Special Counsel and Office of Government Ethics, blockading whistleblowers and numerous investigations. What is your assessment, Mr. Hedler-Gaudet, of the Trump administration's apparent systematic opposition to internal oversight mechanisms in the federal government?
Thank you, Ranking Member Raskin. My assessment is that the last year or so has been one of the most anti-oversight, anti-accountability periods that I've witnessed in our federal government. And I think the things you laid out, as well as others, are the sort of proof in the pudding there. And I think, speaking of things that should be giving us pause and raising red flags, that should all be giving us serious pause and raising serious red flags about how seriously people who claim to take oversight, accountability, fraud, how seriously do they actually take it?
There's been a lot of attention given to Donald Trump's extraordinary use of the pardon power, as in the pardon of violent insurrectionists and cop beaters. But there's also been a forgiveness of $1.5 billion in restitutionary fines that various people had to pay. And a lot of them are fraudsters. The DOJ in Trump's first term brought bank fraud and tax evasion charges against reality TV stars Todd and Julie Chrisley. They were convicted in 2022. They owed more than $22 million in restitution to taxpayers and to their victims. But then Trump suddenly, inexplicably pardoned them and forgave all of the money that they were supposed to be paying back to their victims. Todd Chrisley bragged publicly about his get-out-of-jail-free card, jubilantly exclaiming, "The feds got effed." Let me give you one other example. Trump, on April 23rd, issued a pardon for Paul Walchuk, a former nursing home exec who pleaded guilty to multiple tax crimes. What he was doing was taking millions of dollars from the nurses and orderlies and doctors who worked for him at his facilities, took more than $10 million that way, instead of giving it to the IRS for their taxes. He used the money to buy a $2 million yacht and to pay for high-end jet travel and to go shopping at Bergdorf Goodman and Cartier. Well, he was sentenced to 18 months in prison for stealing his employees' tax withholdings. He was ordered to pay his employees back $4.4 million for the money he looted from their accounts. So he's going to have to pay that back. But then he got his mom to go to a glitzy fundraising dinner for Donald Trump at Mar-a-Lago, and she paid $1 million for her ticket. Then, right after Trump was inaugurated in his second term, Walchuk petitioned for a presidential pardon, arguing that he was the victim of political retaliation because they were Trump supporters. And what do you know? President Trump issued a complete pardon with forgiveness of all of the financial fines and restitution that Mr. Walchuk was going to have to pay back to his workers, the nurses and doctors and orderlies. So that was forgiven. That was $4 million taken away from the victims of a fraud and given back to the perpetrator.
This guy's a clown.
Okay, now, if we had all day, we could go on all day with this because that's how their pay-to-play pardon system works. What does this do to our efforts to root out fraud and corruption and in crimes in different industries?
I think it provides a perverse incentive structure. I opened my statement by saying that we all have an obligation and a responsibility to do what we can to prevent fraud and to hold perpetrators of fraud accountable. But that last bit, holding a perpetrator of fraud accountable, perhaps via conviction, doesn't mean much if all one needs to do is contribute to the right super PAC or attend the right fundraiser, and suddenly that accountability and that conviction is wiped away, including the financial restitution you mentioned. So those kinds of actions are at direct cross purposes with any effort to promote a broader, more systemic approach to rooting out waste, fraud, and abuse.
Gentlemen's time has expired.
Thank you very much, and I yield back.
Chair recognizes the chairman of the full committee, Mr. Jordan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Dexter, let me make sure we got this right. you get tips and complaints, whistleblowers or others come to you and tell you something's not right at these child care centers in your state that are getting all kinds of taxpayer money. Is that right? That's how it started?
That's correct.
Okay. And then you go and do your work. You got 28 years experience investigating things, and specifically in the crime and financial fraud area. Is that right?
That's correct.
And you go out and find out these child care centers, there aren't any kids. No kids are there. I mean, there's some, but there's like, you don't see the playground. You don't see any kids at a place where they're supposed to be helping children. And then you also find out most of them are run by Somali individuals. Is that accurate?
That is correct.
And then you make some recommendations. You said, here's what we should do. I think you put this on page 2 of your testimony. You said there's some basic things you should do. No, you said they didn't have biometric attendance system. They should do that. They should have electronic submission requirements. They need security cameras. You made some recommendations.
Yes.
And then what happened?
Nothing.
They ignored your recommendations, but it didn't stop there, did it? They ignored your recommendations. They called you a racist, right?
Correct.
Typical left. I always say the left will tell a lie. Big media will report it. You tell the truth. They call you a racist. Exactly what happened here. So they ignore your recommendations. They call you a racist, but it even got worse than that. You can imagine. They started investigating you. Is that right?
Yes, we were interviewed by an outside firm for a report given to the Office of Legislative Auditor.
What did that report look like? What did they say? They call you a racist. What did the report say?
The report basically questioned our investigative tactics, looked at how our unit was managed.
Even though you got 28 years experience in this particular area, tips and whistleblowers came to you, even though that was the whole catalyst for doing this.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. And the end result is what? The end result is Miss Larson, who's actually helping people. She
Correct.
suffers, and the people she helps suffers. Is that right, Miss Larson? Not to mention the fact that taxpayers are getting ripped off, but the people who do good work, who actually help people, you suffer.
The disabled are paying for the money stolen.
Yeah. Why do you think all this is the case? I mean, all this brings me to this seems to be a typical pattern, but in the end, you got to ask why. Why was, when you point out what's going on, you have good people doing good work who suffer, the taxpayers are getting ripped off. Someone's got to ask, well, why did they take not follow your recommendations, call you a racist, investigate you instead of just fixing the problem? Why did they do that? What could be the answer? Anyone want to hazard a, Mr. Shirley, you want to hazard a guess? Why that's the case?
Well, they simply use that as a deflection technique to make you not want to speak out against the fraud.
Yeah. It seems to me it's politics, though. You think it's politics, Mr. Dexter?
Yes, I do.
Hey, the people at the top, like, well, we don't want to do this. We don't want to be called racist. In fact, we found that out a week ago in a hearing where we were looking at this Feeding Our Future program. We found out they actually shut that program off for a while. They said, time out, something's not right here. They found the same kind of things you found, Mr. Dexter. And they said, we're going to stop payment. And then it restarted. And the reason it restarted is because they threatened a racial discrimination lawsuit against the authorities there in Minnesota. Okay, forget about the fact that when we do this, we restart the money, we're going to hurt good people like Ms. Larson and the people she helps, and rip off the taxpayers. We're going to do it all for politics. And we also found, interestingly enough, the Attorney General in Minnesota had a meeting with the key folks in this particular program, and then they find out a couple weeks later they start sending in campaign contributions. I think it's politics. I think it's politics driving it all. And that's why it's appropriate we're investigating here at the congressional level. That's why it's appropriate the Department of Justice has put in place a specific individual to focus on this, not only in Minnesota, but around the country. I talk too much. Anyone else want to throw on? I'll give you, Mr. Shirley, Ms. Larson, a chance to say anything if you want. If not, I'll yield 28 seconds to our chairman. Yield 20 seconds, remaining my time to the chairman.
Thank you. So, Mr. Hedler-Godet, would it surprise you that Joe Biden issued pardons to someone named Crundell, the largest municipal fraud in the country's history, and had a restitution amount of $53.7 million that was never paid following the commutation? Would that surprise you, sir?
That would not surprise me. And actually, in my written statement, I outlined how some pardons under the last
Jim is on point, man. I like Jim Jordan.
also fall into the same pattern of pardoning convicted fraudsters. So I'm in agreement with you there.
Yeah, thank you. And without objection, that time's expired. So without objection, Mr. Klein will be permitted to participate in today's hearing for the purpose of questioning the witness if a member yields him time for that purpose. And now we're going to go to Mr. Moore from Alabama.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. All this talk about pardons and the ultimate shyster, one of them was Hunter Biden. He got pardoned after Joe promised he wasn't going to do that on the way out. So anyway, that's another pardon for another day. Ms. Larson, I'm impressed with your son. I honestly thought he was your attorney when you guys were sitting there. But were there early warning signs, if acted on, that could have prevented the fraud schemes from growing to the scale that we see now?
I'd say yes. Looking back, this Somali community in Minnesota has a high prevalence of autism. And I know that because I serve a lot of minorities in my centers. So when these centers started popping up, I thought, good for them. You know, like I took care of my son. We haven't had a waiting list for 5 years, so I thought it was a positive. And then it just started to go and go, where now it's 400 plus of these, and it started to. I didn't Nick Shirley at that's a verb now. And go out and go and see, because obviously I'm busy and that's not what I have time for.
Thank you for the likes.
I think there were a lot of early warning signs. I think if anybody was actually paying attention.
Wednesday.
They would have caught.
Oh, 100%.
Because how long have you been in business? 20 years?
Over 20 years.
And you went through a number of audits, I think, every year.
Thank you.
Every year.
So how is it that these groups are getting away with it, and you're under the thumb of the government auditing you every year? Why do you think that is?
I either there's a double standard and they don't, for whatever reason, have the same expectations that we do.
Thank you so much.
They're just
maybe Chairman Jordan was onto something. Maybe it's politics. Yeah. Mr. Shirley, now I guess investigative journalists turn on.
Real runner. Thank you.
Influencers. So, can you confirm how many daycare centers you personally visited in Minnesota during your investigation?
During that first video, we went to around 7.
How did you select those facilities? I know you said earlier footprints in the snow, but how is it that you identified those facilities to go to initially?
So the man David in the video, he had the daycares with the CCAP funding, and we just simply drove around Minnesota and around Minneapolis area.
It took a lot of courage to do that, I would imagine. Probably more so now than what it was when you initially did it. 100 million views, you said.
Yes, over 140 million views on X.
So what was Mr. David's background? How did you connect with him, and how did he call you, or did you reach out?
He simply is just a man in Minnesota who has a passion for his city. He's been seeing fraud taking place for years, and out of all the thousands of messages I get on Instagram and other platforms, I just happened to read his, and he provided me the information, so I gave him a phone call.
And then from there, just went to those different facilities. What was probably the most interesting thing as you were doing this? I think I saw the video. We watched it, and it looked like it was a number of facilities like in the same building.
Yes. So in one building, there was, I believe, 3 daycares, and there were no children. And they were all receiving CCAP funding for separate daycares. There's one daycare.
Nick Shirley for the win.
One day, it was closed by the government, and then that same day it was reopened underneath another name. They both received CCAP funding.
I bet, Ms. Larson, they probably weren't getting audited nearly like you were.
I would guess not.
So how many daycares are there in Minneapolis we think are fraudulent right now? Mr. Shirley, any idea? Are the amount of money total? You got any idea on that?
Well, they've frozen over $185 million, and not a single business has been able to prove their list.
So far, he had a bodyguard.
$185 million for sure that we know. Mr. Dexter, I have a question for you. What common patterns or warning signs usually indicate that the provider or the program
facts, not sides.
As you were doing your investigations and 28 years of experience, what are some of the indicators that you see that maybe that should be a telltale sign or a red flag that there's fraud there?
Well, one of the immediate signs that we saw when we would go out to first look at the location is where that was located. A lot of times they were located in commercial areas. And I'm not talking like strip malls or anything like that. I'm talking about like industrial areas where you wouldn't typically find a child care center. We would notice that there was no play area. And if there was any play equipment, it was bare minimum. Now, there was an exception that if there was a playground area within a very short walking distance, that would count. But a lot of times we didn't see that. But the most glaring thing was that when we watched the centers, you know, we would sit and watch it for a couple of days before we even put up surveillance cameras. We would watch, and we would see little to no children present. If anything, there would be a few kids.
As you begin to blow the whistle, the investigator became
Gentleman's time has expired.
I'll yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Chair recognizes the ranking member, Ms. McBath.
Thank you, Chair. When he began his second term, President Trump broke from historic norms and fired 17 inspectors general, people who serve as critical watchdogs and prevent waste, fraud, and abuse. A federal judge held that these firings were illegal, but also held that she could not reinstate these people due to their important roles. As a result, the president has been able to appoint acting inspectors general who have themselves been removed after informing Congress that Trump officials are not cooperating with investigations. Mr. Hitler-Gaudette, how do these frequent firings affect the ability of the inspector general offices to prevent and investigate fraud?
I think they fundamentally undermine it, and they also create a real chilling effect for the inspector general who are left. The incentive to do something that could upset the powers that be suddenly becomes a bit of a risky proposition. And so between the completely undermining them and the chilling effect, you are really dampening and damaging the ability to do real oversight.
Thank you. And how does the politicization of inspector general appointments affect the morale and effectiveness of career investigative staff there within these offices?
But also has a severely negative effect on morale and efficacy within the offices.
So I believe we can and should do more to prevent fraud and improve oversight so that all of our government efforts are doing the most that they can to help the American people. When the Judiciary Committee marked up the Republicans' partisan big ugly spending bill, I offered an amendment that would dedicate half of 1% of funding to be used for oversight and fraud improvement and prevention. My Republican colleagues, they opposed the amendment. Mr. Hitler-Gaudette, in your opening statement, you spoke on steps that Congress could take to ensure robust, nonpartisan oversight. The Project on Government Oversight recently published an article, 7 Ways Congress Should Sharpen Its Oversight in 2026.
Without objection.
Thank you. Thank you. Is there anything else that you want to highlight from those recommendations?
Sure. Yeah, I just want to pause to note that Congress really is the indispensable actor when it comes to doing oversight. There's supposed to be a somewhat adversarial relationship between the branches, and Congress is supposed to be the primary adversary when it comes to the other 2 branches and conducting oversight. But that is predicated on Congress taking that oversight duty seriously, irrespective of who is in charge of the other 2 branches. And so I think there's a political will issue there with oversight, but also there are some mechanical issues. So Congress could do a better job of holding hearings that are a bit more bipartisan, a bit more focused on the facts, as opposed to the sizzle of a given anecdote or scandal. I mean, really trying to get at root causes and really trying to take hard, deep looks at the underlying structural reasons why things like fraud happen. It's not as sexy. It's not going to get you as many views on social media, but it's going to actually ideally lead to long-term, sustainable, durable reforms that can really crack down on the problem.
Thank you. And so the short-lived Doge office was supposed to cut fraud. Mr. Hitler-Gaudette, what did it actually do, and how did its actions actually affect everyday Americans?
So Doge was a complete failure. Even on its own terms, the primary progenitor of Doge claimed that he was going to find $2 trillion, then he moved that down to $1 trillion in waste, fraud, and abuse cut spending. But in 2025, we actually spent more money than we spent in 2024. At the opening of this fiscal year in October, we ran the largest opening month budget deficit ever run before at $285 billion. We have hollowed out the key functions of a bunch of agencies. Any claim that DOGE was effective either on cutting spending or promoting effectiveness or efficiency are just flat out undermined and undercut by the facts.
And Mr. Hitler-Gaudette, because you have done investigations yourself, did you do any follow-up on Mr. Shirley's video?
So personally, I took a look at some of what had been done to try and backstop what Mr. Shirley indicated in his video by professional journalists at CBS and by professional oversight practitioners like the Inspector General in Minnesota. And as it turns out, they had a difficult time substantiating what Mr. Shirley was claiming to be true in his video. And in fact, they found countervailing evidence, including having been provided security footage by one of those daycares of children being dropped off the very day that Mr. Shirley was supposedly there. So I think in my view, I would have to, I'd err on the side of believing the professional journalists at CBS and the professional oversight practitioners at the Inspector General office.
Thank you. 773.
I recognize the gentlelady from Florida, Ms. Lee.
Chicago.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And so on that note, I think it's important that we return to a discussion of how these investigations were conducted and the type of evidence that led to the discovery of this massive fraud. One thing that is clear based on the testimony today is that this is not just a Minnesota problem. This is a warning sign for every state that is administering large-scale programs using taxpayer dollars. And we need to get to the bottom of how to identify this type of fraud and prevent it from continuing to occur. So, Mr. Dexter, I'd like to go back to your testimony, both what you have shared with us already about your extensive background investigating and analyzing program fraud and the methods that you used to identify the theft of taxpayer dollars in this particular type of case. In your written testimony, you mentioned that case selection and investigations were begun in part by looking at funding data. And I am interested in how your office would use things like funding data, use statistics, and other information and evidence to begin to develop these cases.
Good one, Critical.
Well, it wasn't hard to find the funding amounts.
Good one.
We looked at the centers that received CCAP funds, and then we listed them out. We had what was originally referred to as the top 100 list, and it was based off of centers receiving the most CCAP funding, and that was generated through the billing process and the people that administer the funds.
And when you looked at that list, did it turn out that there were certain facilities that were outliers in some way, either because they were receiving a larger amount of funding based on student population than appeared typical, or because of where they were located? Tell us how you identified which facilities warranted further review.
Well, when we started looking at the centers that were receiving the most funds, the investigators were each assigned cases, were assigned centers, and we first started looking into what the billing pattern was, or what the billing amount was, how many children were being billed at these centers. And we would have centers that were billing for 120 plus children, and looking at the different days and times, kind of establishing a pattern that just was outside the realm of a typical daycare center.
So in other words, you used objective data and evidence as the foundation to proceed further with your investigations.
Yes, in order to start the investigation, that's what we would begin with.
And in your experience, wouldn't you also say that that is the typical method or atypical method for beginning and analyzing a potential fraud case of any nature in any community?
Yes, because in order to do the investigation, you first have to find out if it warrants an investigation and to what extent that investigation would be.
And now, isn't it also correct? You mentioned in your testimony systemic weaknesses that allowed the large-scale fraud, even after you had developed substantial evidence that there was, in fact, fraud occurring, that there were institutional and systemic barriers that prevented you from successfully moving these cases through prosecution. And indeed, in your testimony, you note that in 2019, you chose to retire because the process had become so constrained that meaningful work was no longer possible. Tell us about the barriers and ultimately that profound frustration that led you to retire.
Well, when we were originally hired, when this unit was originally created and we were hired, we were hired with the understanding that our job was going to be to investigate fraud and stop it. And as we proceeded through with that, it wasn't by our doing that it turned out that the centers we investigated were predominantly Somali. But once that was kind of brought out to light, the roadblocks that were put in front of us, being called racist, being called before these boards to be investigated, and basically it wound up turning us into auditors. We wound up just simply reviewing attendance records and matching them up with billing. There really wasn't a lot of substantial investigation anymore, and most of our cases wound up going before administrative hearings rather than criminal.
Which in the end allowed this pattern of conduct to continue to occur, did it not?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Lady yields. Chair recognizes now the gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Knott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To my colleague from Florida, thank you for that line of questioning. I'm going to pick up where she left off. In regard to the testimony that we've heard today, the other side of the aisle makes us believe, or wants us to believe, that the fraud has been effectively stopped, that they aggressively pursued it, they prosecuted it, and that it is under control. Is that your interpretation of where we are, Mr. Dexter?
I believe the fraud is still going on. I don't think anything has changed from what I've seen with Mr. Shirley's videos. I'm seeing in his videos the exact same things that we were seeing back from 2014 to 2019 when I worked there.
And it's astounding to me when I was looking at some of the footage, the evidence. There was almost a sense of, we are owed this money that we're stealing. How dare you investigate us? Did you ever encounter that type of attitude when you were performing these investigations?
There was an underlying attitude like that, that we were taking away their money, and that wasn't fair to them.
In your investigation, sir, was the fraud as obvious as it seems to me that it appeared in the videos and the other evidence that I've reviewed?
Yes, as a matter of fact, when we would go out to do our investigations, one of the things that we would have to do, or I would have to do, is we would scout out a location for our surveillance cameras that allowed us accesses. A lot of that, because of the location where we were in these industrial commercial areas, meant we had to go to businesses and ask them permission. And the number one comment they made was, "Oh, you mean that daycare center over there where there's no children?" So everyone else around it saw it.
In regards to your investigation, sir, I'm assuming that you did not just investigate daycare fraud. What types of fraud did you investigate?
No, our function was strictly childcare fraud, but some of that overlapped into, even though we didn't investigate it, a lot of it was also tied into the medical transportation. And
did you ever investigate single entities that were appearing as though they were committing fraud in multiple avenues?
I'm sorry.
So it's like, was there one facility that was a daycare? It was also associated with the medical transport. Were there people who were double dipping in the fraud in your investigations?
Not that we saw as far as different organizations, but there were where one daycare center owner owned multiple daycare centers. So what we saw was more within the daycare center.
Yeah. Ms. Larson, thank you for being here. I echo my colleague's sentiment from Alabama. Your son is very impressive. What's his name?
His name is Caden.
Caden, thank you for being here today. You look sharp. You're doing great. Let me just talk to you about these various audits that you were submitting. Were they?
Very. They'd be there for hours to come in and say, I want to see these files for these kids at this date and this time.
Was there any way that you could have tricked them, concealed it, if you had not had any children there? Would it have been possible?
Absolutely not.
In regards to the services that you've rendered, first, thank you.
Thank you.
And then in terms of the
hey Johnny boy, how you doing?
How does it make you feel when you
thanks for joining in, like and subscribe.
Accounts that hundreds of millions of dollars have been taken out of the country in suitcases to hostile nations?
I can't even respond the way I feel about that, but I will say it's still happening. To the questioning you, there's only 2 autism centers that have actually been shut down of all of these that are going on. So what they're doing is this prepaid AI system at Optum to look for suspicious claims, which is why we're
tip top. Thanks for subscribing. Thank you.
And it's not going to work. I'm going to tell you, it's not going to work. They just need to do what Nick did. Go and see that there's no kids there. Go and check it out.
And what Mr. Dexter did. Data-driven review.
Yeah.
without any preconceptions, without any prejudices, and then holding the fraudsters to account. And when he did that, he was called a racist.
Yeah.
It's astounding. It is astounding. And you said that you helped many patients, diverse patients.
Yeah.
How have those patients been harmed by this administration in Minnesota, the Walz administration?
They are all being harmed.
Thank you,
if I
Johnny
shut
boy. I
down
see.
next week.
Thank you.
Is that what you're up
Yeah.
against?
Well, if I haven't gotten paid now, the last date of service was December 5th. I'm over $400,000 in debt. My payroll is $250,000 every 2 weeks, and we get paid every 2 weeks. So on Sunday night, I'll know if I get any money. I haven't been
Really
paid
appreciate you
a dime.
guys.
All
Thank
my
you so
claims
much.
have been held. So I'm preparing to. Apparently in Minnesota too, I can't just pause services. If I pause my services, then DHS can say, "I'm sorry, you've lost your license to serve the kids through this program." So I don't know what they think we're supposed to do. Yeah.
Well, again, thank you for being here. I appreciate all the testimony. Sorry I didn't get to everybody else. There's a lot of questions, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank
Gentleman yields. I recognize the gentleman from California, Mr. Kiley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Shirley, thank you for your testimony today and the work that you've done. Americans hear these numbers of the fraud that we have, and whether it's 10,000 or 10 million or 10 billion, sometimes the numbers, you almost become desensitized to it. And so the way that your video was able to show people the fraud sort of in real life actually happening, I think opened a lot of eyes and has helped to catalyze a level of scrutiny that we really should have had before. So you mentioned in your testimony that you think that what you discovered in Minnesota, that this is not isolated to that state, but likely exists in other parts of the country as well, correct?
Correct.
What makes you think that?
Well, now you're seeing, since I've posted that video, lots of other people have started to go to other locations, for instance, in Ohio or in Maine or in California. They're also seeing the similar fraud take place in other daycares in a lot of other locations.
Yeah, I have a particular interest in California, being from that state, and we know there's been a lot of fraud. There was $32.6 billion that's been confirmed in unemployment insurance fraud. There's 1.2 million fraud.
A lot of shows come and goes and disappear overnight.
Have you gotten any sense,
right?
Or have you seen any signs there that sort of are similar to what aroused your suspicions in Minnesota?
Yeah, and fraud in California might be worse than the fraud in Minnesota.
What makes you say that?
Well, $24 billion went missing for homelessness. They've been trying to build this train for years, yet there's hardly anything to prove for that. Fires.
Yeah, those are good points. So let's run through a couple of those. Because I mentioned the areas where we have confirmed fraud, but then you also have these areas where you have so much spending, and then we look at what results from that spending, and there's nothing. So $24 billion in homelessness, and yet the homeless population went up. And a state audit found that they couldn't even figure out where the money went or what the outcomes linked to that spending were. Is that something that is kind of a red flag for you?
Yeah, it's a major red flag, and you don't even have to be smart to be able to know that that's a red flag.
Well, unfortunately, our state legislators haven't managed to figure that out, or at least the governor hasn't. So what are you saying about him?
They're not smart. No, but yeah, I mean, it's so obvious, and that's what we saw in Minnesota is how complicit the government has been in enabling this fraud to happen. Quality Learning Center had over 90 violations, yet they continue to give that daycare $1.9 million.
Yeah, that's a great point. That there's the political accountability just hasn't been there, and that's what enables it to continue. So then you mentioned the high-speed rail as well. So there's been about $18 billion spent so far. No track has been laid, and not a single passenger has ridden the train. So when you spend $18 billion on a train and there's no train, does that raise suspicions for you?
Yes.
So you think that might be something worth looking at?
For sure.
We also had a $650 million 911 service that they scrapped after 6 years, so absolutely no value from it. Maybe that's another example where there might at least be questions.
I think you got a lot in California.
All right. Well, we'll look forward to seeing what you find. We're certainly trying to use whatever tools we have here to bring more accountability in California.
Accountability, baby.
I wanted to also ask you a couple of questions about your work, because you have extensive experience on the law enforcement side trying to detect fraud. That's actually how in California we discovered the EDD fraud, the unemployment fraud, is it wasn't the state suddenly figuring it out. It was district attorneys who came together and investigated and in fact pointed to the fact that the state had let this happen and failed to heed their warnings and hadn't taken basic fraud detection steps. So is this something that you encounter? Like, what kind of internal controls make it so fraud is more difficult, and what type of lack of internal controls make
I'm on iHeartRadio as well.
I would say the biggest thing was the fact that when we tried to investigate this, once we started bringing cases forward and it showed that the number of centers that we investigated were Somali, the biggest roadblock was the fact that they didn't want to follow through on these cases. They shut down investigations. They made us, in light of the report from
Right, Williams, Nick on it.
We spent nearly a year pulled away from our investigations because one of the things they determined was that when our unit started, we didn't have a proper case management system for recording and keeping track of the tips. So as investigators, we instead had to spend nearly a year entering past complaints made to DHS into a newly created database. We couldn't do our investigations because of that. So they kept us from doing our work, basically.
Yeah. So the states that make fraud detection a priority have less fraud than those that actively contravene efforts like yours. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I yield back.
Thank you. Gentleman's time has expired. Recognize the ranking member, Ms. McBath, for some UCs.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to ask unanimous consent to enter into the record an article, Republicans' claims of fraud are pretext for unpopular and drastic Medicaid cuts.
Without objection.
Thank you.
So I have.
Oh, I have some.
Yeah, the UC. Yeah, please go ahead.
Actually, forgive me, I have a handful of them here, Mr. Chairman. One is a letter dated October 21, 2025 from Representative Benny Thompson to Robert F. Kennedy Jr. regarding the decision to rescind the $101 million penalty imposed on Mississippi. Press release dated September 17, 2025, titled Governor Walz issues executive order directing state agencies to take additional steps to combat fraud. Executive Order 2501, titled Preventing Fraud and Establishing the Financial Crimes and Fraud section of the Department of Public Safety, signed by Governor Tim Walz, January 3rd, 2025. Article dated December 2nd, 2025, titled Trump calls Somali immigrants garbage as U.S. reportedly targets Minnesota community. Article dated January 9, 2026, titled 5 States Sue Administration for Withholding Billions in Social Safety Net Funds. Article dated January 10, 2026, titled Behind the Somali Daycare Panic is a Mother and Son Duo Angling to Become Top MAGA Influencers. Article dated December 31, 2025, titled Right-Wing YouTuber Behind Viral Minnesota Fraud Video Has Long Anti-Immigrant History. Article dated January 11, 2026, titled Fact Check What's Really Happening with Child Care Fraud in Minnesota. And finally, article dated January 13, 2026, titled The Trump Administration Says It's Cracking Down on Fraud, but it gave a red state a pass. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Without objection, Chair recognizes Ms. McBath again for the UC.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I ask unanimous consent to enter into the record an article titled Trump's Child Care Fund Freezing in 5 States could cost families $400 million by Julia Cation of the Century Foundation.
Without objection, I recognize myself for a series of UCs. From Fox News, Biden clemency for convicted fraudsters met with outrage. Slap in face. From CNN, victims shocked after Biden grants clemency to Kids for Cash judge and $54 million embezzler. And from Axios, Biden sets presidential record on pardons and clemency. Also, Minnesota daycare expose. Journalist strikes again, and part 2 names the hub of the fraud wheel. 78th defendant charged in feeding our future fraud scheme from U.S. Attorney's Office, District of Minnesota. Suitcases filled with millions in cash flew out of MSP airport. Ex-TSA agent connects dots years later from Survival World. From the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, HHS freezes child care and family assistance grants in 5 states for fraud concerns. From the U.S. Attorney's Office, District of Minnesota, 6 additional defendants charged. 1 defendant pleads guilty in ongoing fraud schemes. This is from the local Fox News in Minneapolis. Through the years, a decade of investigating fraud, Minnesota. U.S. Department of Homeland Security release. ICE continues arresting worst of the worst in sanctuary Minneapolis, including pedophiles, gang members, and drug traffickers. From MSN, TSA flags suspicious cash outflow at Minneapolis-St. Paul Airport. From MSN, foreign ATM, Somali cash exodus from Minneapolis exponentially larger than other major U.S. airports. From Breitbart, SBA cutting off grants to Minnesota over reports of Somali fraud. Vance praises YouTuber Nick Shirley reporting on Minnesota fraud. Waltz and Omar using ICE operations to distract from fraud scandal. And from Just the News, in Somali fraud scandal, Republicans probe evidence of a blue state election scheme. From the New York Post, ringleader of $250 million Minnesota welfare fraud scandal ordered by judge to forfeit Porsche and luxury goods. From LifeZet.com, TSA whistleblower, Somalis regularly flew out with suitcases stuffed with millions in cash. From Fox News, Minnesota welfare fraud probe targets Somali Hawala money transfers. From the Star News Network, feds probe hundreds of millions in suspected Somali cash and luggage leaving Minneapolis Airport. From USCIS announces results of Operation Twin Shield, a large-scale immigration fraud investigation. From PBS, Nome says Homeland Security is investigating fraud in Minneapolis. From Cornell Law, this is the 18 USC Section 666, theft or bribery concerning programs receiving federal funds. Also, same source, 18 USC Section 641, public money, property, or records. Also, from same source, 18 U.S. Code 1001, statements or entries generally. Without objection, I now recognize myself for my 5 minutes of questioning. So, I have read all of your statements, and I do thank you, Mr. Hedler-Godet, for your recommendations. Mr. Dexter also had some recommendations. I think those are prescient. I think those are important. But I also have to bring some additional information out just because it's in my nature. I got to do it. So, Mr. Hedler-Godet, you've been talking about the IGs because you were asked about the IGs. But do you know how many cases, for instance, criminal cases are being investigated, say, by the Department of Homeland Security IG right now?
I don't know the number off the top of my head, no.
Would it surprise you if there were 650 ongoing cases with 200 of those being COVID related?
That would not surprise me, no.
And do you know how many audits they have going right now?
Nope.
They have 60 audits going right now with another 20 investigations going. That sounds to me like the IG there, at least in DHS, is not being chilled because of the appointment of temporary IGs. Am I wrong on that, or am I misconstruing that?
One thing about the DHS IG, Mr. Joseph Kafari, is he was actually appointed under the first Trump administration, and he has remained ever since. We actually at the Project on Government Oversight have long recommended that Mr. Kafari be fired because he has had a long and demonstrated track record of slow-walking investigations at DHS, particularly when it comes to abuse of force and other issues with DHS agents.
And yet the Oversight Committee for the IGs didn't adhere to that recommendation. So anyway, that point, I felt that point needed to be made.
Subscribe.
Additionally, Mr. Dexter, you looked at some of the same kind of physical evidence that Mr. Shirley looked at with regard to physical presence at the various daycare facilities that you were examining between 2014 and 2019. Is that true?
Yes.
And you saw basically the same kind of physical evidence that Mr. Shirley exposed.
That's correct.
You also looked at funding data, and you also had whistleblowers.
All right, you guys, I'm going to call it 2 hours and 35 minutes in. Either go about 3 hours or more, but got to take care of some business. Appreciate you guys. Like and subscribe. My name is Deunta. I'll be back.